And in fact, Hatta is probably the best place in the world to see parrots. So that's what I wanted to write about. So people think of, going to the Mallee, going to Whitefeld or Hatta, what's special about it? And they don't realise that this is the world's best place for parrots anywhere, anywhere in the world. And so I sort of wanted to add that sort of element into the book. So something that I felt was missing from the others. So bring the sort of diversity of the environment there, bring in some of the animals and plants, and also talk about not just the rare bird that you want to see, but the special birds that you want to see in those places. So that was the concept for the book.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding. I'm your host, Guillaume Doerig. Today's guest is a well-known Australian birdwatcher and former convener of BirdLife Australia in Victoria. He is the author of several Australian bird books, including Finding Australian Birds, a Field Guide, and Where to See Birds in Victoria, while his popular bird trip reports provide a wealth of information for local and international birders. He currently works for a wide range of bird tour companies. He is a tour leader for the US-based Wings Birding Tours Worldwide and tour leader for UK-based Sunbird Tours and Birdfinders. In Australia, he is also a leader for Australian tour companies Bellbird Tours and Echidna Walkabout Tours. And it's amazing to have him on the podcast. Big name, and so I'm so glad he's taken the time. Tim Dolby, how are you, Tim?
I'm great. Thanks again for inviting me on. I know we talked about this a long time ago and just things, but it's great now to be on. So thank you. And by the way, the podcasts are fantastic. I've really enjoyed listening to it.
Oh, well, that's what a great compliment. Thanks, Tim, for that. And I'm looking forward to our episode because we've got a lot to talk about. But first, and I'm sure our listeners will be keen to hear this from you particularly, what aspect of birding brings you joy?
Okay, so it's a really good question, and the way I see it is, I particularly like walking, say, through a forest, and when you're walking through a forest, you're listening to the sounds of the birds, and you're taking in the smells of the lovely lemon-scented eucalypts, and you're just noticing all that's about you. So I really enjoy being in an environment and understanding that environment and understanding it completely, sort of that magic of understanding. So, for example, you might be walking through a forest and up in the tree you hear a red-browed tree creeper calling up the top of a mountain ash. And then next to it there might be an olive whistler calling from a rough-barked tree fern beside you. And then in the Nothofagus, there's a rose robin calling up in the tree. And then, there might be a pilot bird in the forest wiregrass that's growing beside the track. So just walking through a forest and being aware of the environment, and it's sort of like this magical experience about being in your environment and knowing how it's working, knowing the aspects of what it is. It's sort of, as I said, I really enjoyed that magic of knowing my environment. In fact, how bird watching occurs. You're sort of wandering around listening, and then you might hear something a little bit different. So you might be wandering through that forest, and then you hear this call, and you know the call well, but it's not what you'd normally expect to hear there. So you might be a scarlet honeyeater calling in the forest, in a spot where you don't normally hear them. It's an example of that expansion of the population down south. So that's what really brings me joy, the magic of walking through an environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you said about it really encompasses, it's quite paradoxical because the joy of birding doesn't only come from the birds.
No, exactly right. It's the magic of where you are. Yeah.
And it brings you to such amazing places and I never cease to tire I love talking about things like that because it really does uplift you when especially I've experienced this when you have trouble in life, personal relationships or work or troubles, and you get out and you get out into this environment and see an amazing bird. It's like you instantly forget everything that's going wrong in your life.
That's exactly right. Just yesterday I was walking in my local patch of forest, and I saw a grey shrike thrush, and it's not particularly rare, but where I am, that's a really nice bird to see. So it just uplifted me, and I got a bit of joy from seeing that bird. It was really great. Just out of interest, at the moment, out my window, I've got my magpies are feeding on my lawn. I've got a pair that come in all the time.
Oh, lovely. Where do you live exactly?
I'm in Melbourne. So what about you? Where are you based? Are you in Coffs Harbour?
Well, I'm just a little town called Woolgoolga, which is about 20 minutes north of Coffs Harbour, yeah. So it's been a big change, and the birding is so great. It's like subtropical.
So you were from Melbourne, and then you moved up there. And that was a deliberate choice to go and live somewhere beautiful. Because it's a spectacular area. It's actually, it's where the tropics meet the temperate environment. So you get that incredible melting pot of both north and south. So it's a real hot spot. So you're very lucky.
Absolutely. I've been loving it. And it's really a special place. Like we were talking about environments, like that, as you say, it just melds together. It's quite a special spot up here, I think. And I believe it's a little bit overlooked because everyone goes up to kind of the Gold Coast area and Lamington and all that.
That's right. They go to Lamington and so on. And they just don't come that little bit further south. But you're right. Lots of different habitats and, crossover points. So that makes a special birding spot for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it is a change from Melbourne. And so, just on that about changing environments and changing, specific places. Are you locally? Are you from Melbourne, or have you moved about a bit as well?
So I'm actually a New Zealander, but I was born in New Zealand and moved over here when I was very young. So I would consider myself a Melburnian, pretty much through and through. Melburnians have a certain way to look. So, for example, both you and I are wearing black T-shirts, for example, and it's so often I'll be traveling around Australia and I'll see someone and I'll just go up and chat. And by coincidence, the people I always chat to tend to be Melburnians because I'm somehow attracted to the way they're dressed and the way they look. It's a very distinctive way we look and are, I think. So, yeah. So Melbourne is where I'm from. I'm in Melbourne, basically, all my life. Yeah. So I grew up in Parkville, near Royal Park. So.
So I also wanted to ask you, Tim, how did you get into birding?
Yeah, well, my father was a bird watcher, so and my grandfather was a bird watcher, so it's sort of been a generational thing. So I've been bird watching since I was in nappies, basically. So it's sort of part of my blood. So it's sort of what Dad and I did. We'd go camping, we'd walk through the environment, we'd understand the natural history of where we were, and we'd go bird watching. We'd have our binoculars and go bird watching. Basically, we never went without our binoculars. So it was just one of those things. I remember as a kid twitching a leatherwing kite in Victoria when I was about 8. So what had happened in Central Australia, there had been a big rise in the long-haired rat, which is the principal source of food for leatherwing kite. So leatherwing kite numbers exploded. Then the rat numbers crashed when the drought subsided in, and all the leatherwing kites had to go to the coast. And so we were driving along one day, and Dad and I saw this kite in a tree, and we thought, that looks a bit different. And we got out of the car, walked over towards it, and it flew off. It was a leatherwing kite. So, I've been doing that sort of stuff from a very young age, and so it's good fun. So that love of natural history came from my family upbringing, I suppose. What about you? How long have you been birding for?
Yeah, well, for me, it's actually quite similar. It's almost the same. Like my dad is a big bird watcher, as you might know, and so we always use, I'm one of 6, and we always used to go in these, when we used to live in Europe, in Scotland and Switzerland. we always used to go on these big hikes in the mountains and in the forest, and I was always kind of the one with the binoculars and with the field guide, and my dad was like, oh yeah, this is cool, and we always used to kind of have that, and it's such a privilege. Maybe we can touch on that, like to have a parent or a child indeed, with which you can bond over birds. That's rare, I think, and it's quite precious.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you see a wall creeper? When you were in Europe, did you see a wall creeper in Switzerland?
I sure did.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite European bird. I was in France, and I was with my mum, in fact, and mum said, what's that bird up on that church? So way up on the church. And I looked up and saw the flash of red, and it was a wall creeper. So that's actually my favorite European bird. So it's just a great experience. So, it's funny how these things come about, like being with your mum pointing out this, being on a church, and you see this wonderful bird that that lots of people are looking for, and it's very much a special bird. So it was a very special experience. So it's funny. So birds came both from my mum and dad as well. So that love of birding and the environment.
Yeah, that's so great, and it's such a special bond. Like I was saying before, that the familial ties that you can get. I don't know how common that is actually. I don't have an idea of how frequent that would be among birders. Do you have an idea?
It's surprising how few. So a lot of the birders I know, they started at a certain period, but it's not many I know who had bird watch with their parents and their grandparents and that sort of thing, and it makes a difference. It's like learning languages when you're young. It's sort of it's a good way of learning to start very early I don't think it's that common. Maybe it'll become more common because bird watching is becoming such a popular pastime now, and especially amongst the young. So I think it will become more and more common.
I was just going to say that was actually one of the questions that I wanted to get to later, but this is a good spot to kind of explore it, which is what do you think the future of birding in Australia? What does it look like? Do you think it's growing?
It's definitely growing, and during this COVID period, there's been such an explosion in numbers of young birders. At Royal Park in Melbourne here, at any one moment, there might have been 50 bird watchers wandering around with their binoculars, and they're all young and they're all so keen. I think the future is good because they're all so well informed now. This new generation of people, they know about climate change, they know about habitat loss. They've been taught about these sort of issues in school. They know about what they have to do. So I think the future is really good, and it's both male and female. So it's a big growth in female birding as well. So that's just wonderful stuff. So I think the future of birding in Australia is fantastic, and I think it'll cross over into conservation issues as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually, and I think also. Another topic that I think is interesting is as you mentioned, young birders, like younger people who are coming up to kind of explore this hobby and everything it can give. And so since you're quite famous in the birding world, I was actually just reading an Australian Birding Year by Bruce Richardson, and I'm gonna have him on the show shortly as well. And so it's quite funny. Quite a few times it's like, oh, we call Tim Dolby to know exactly where to find this and this and this bird. So it's what I'm trying to get at is the fact that I have the opportunity on this platform to talk to quite well-established birders. And so if any young birders are listening, or any person who is starting to bird, what kind of tips would you give them? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, good question. I think I'd have two things that I'd say. One is learn the calls of birds. Knowing bird calls is everything. So listen to recordings of birds again and again and again. So get to a point where when you hear a bird, you don't have to figure it out. Your brain tells you what it is. It's actually how I bird. I walk through a forest. I don't have to figure out what birds are. I just say, well, that's a rose robin, because my brain has already told me that's what it is. It's the same with just a small viewing or, a slight movement. My brain tends to figure it out. Occasionally I have to override my brain because it says it's this, but I'm going, no, that's not right. And I have to sort of try and figure it out. But learning the calls is really important. The other thing I'd advise for young birders is plan a trip, okay? Go to Cairns. Go to Cairns and go to the Esplanade and look at all the birds, and go to the Daintree. Go for a trip on the Daintree. Go up to Kingfisher Park, spend a couple of days there. Go down to, the Atherton Tablelands around Yungaburra, spend a few days there. Plan that trip and then go back down to Cairns and then go up to the reef, go to Michaelmas Cay and see the birds there. Okay, so young birders need to do that. That's part of the process of learning. Go to Darwin, go to Kakadu, go to Katherine, go to Alice Springs, go to all the places there. So that's what young birders need to do. They need to learn those calls and then go to those places and do it now.
Yeah, excellent advice. And like exposing yourself to as many new species, I suppose, as possible, so you can kind of grow your own knowledge of each. Yeah, because in different parts of Australia, it's like this. It's like almost a different country. Coming from Europe, it's like this is the same country, really.
Exactly right. I went up to the Iron Range a couple of times this year, and it's like going to New Guinea. It's a little section of New Guinea. It's reflective of when the sea levels were lower and New Guinea and Australia connected. There's this little patch of lowland rainforest in the Iron Range, which is basically New Guinea forest, and all the birds in there and all the animals that you find in New Guinea. So it's like a totally different place. Australia is wonderful for that, all those different types of places.
And that is something I want to kind of shift on as well, because those of you who are watching on YouTube, this book is amazing, and it's Finding Australian Birds by Tim Dolby and Rowan Clark, and I'm sure a lot of listeners and viewers will be familiar with it. So speaking of all these amazing, you can see it's been I keep it in the car actually.
Yeah, I can see that is well worn. That's great, fantastic. It's surprising how many people I come across and they've got their book, and I'll be talking to them and say, "Oh, the only reason I'm here," and I'll be in the middle of nowhere, "the only reason I'm here is because of you." And then they'll pull their book out. I've been walking along and I've met this person, and then suddenly I see this person running to me from a distance, and they've gone back to their car and grabbed the book, and then they're running after me down some track to get an autograph.
Wow!
So it's So that happens quite a bit. So
incredible, yeah. It must be a great experience to kind of have that kind of a physical manifestation of your passion for birding and the joy of birding. But for the moment, I want to get into how exactly you came around to the idea of, like, it's a gargantuan task to do a book like that. So how did you come out with the idea to write a book like that?
Well, I effectively already done it. So there was a couple of books on the market at the time, and they're still there. One was a really broad book that just basically said, here's the national park and these are the birds that you might see there, and gives a long list. And then there's another book on the market which might only mention one bird, the rare bird that was there, but ignore everything else. So in effect, because I'd written all my trip reports previously, and I'd already been to all these sites, I was just basically, putting that all together. What was missing in those reports was the sort of love of the place. So if you think about somewhere like Hattah Kilkine National Park, it's a good place to see striated grass wren and mallee emu wren, but it's also one of the best places to see parrots. So you can see major Mitchell cockatoo, you can see regent parrot, you can see mulga parrot, blue bonnets, you can see yellow rosellas, you can see corellas, and so on. So Hattah is, in fact, people refer to Australia as being the land of the parrots. That I see it as the place in the world where the best parrots are. And Hattah is, certainly in Victoria, one of the best places to see inland parrots. And in fact, Hattah is probably the best place in the world to see parrots. So that's what I wanted to write about. So people think of going to the Mallee, going to Whitefeld or Hatter, what's special about it? And they don't realise that this is the world's best place for parrots anywhere, anywhere in the world. And so I sort of wanted to add that sort of element into the book. So something that I felt was missing from the others. So bring the sort of diversity of the environment there, bring in some of the animals and plants, and also talk about not just the rare bird that you want to see, but the special birds that you want to see in those places. So that was the concept for the book.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was a resounding success. I mean, like it's I followed it many times, and it's uncanny as to how accurate some of the descriptions are. And
that's because I've been to all those places. So so I was just writing about where I've been effectively. So
yeah. And also, I'm interested in understanding, because I don't know any of this. How did you kind of divide the work with Rowan? Did you have different roles, or how did that work?
Yeah, well, so the way it worked is that I approached Rowan and said, come and give me a hand. And so I wrote all the text for Australia, so all the mainland text in Tasmania. Rowan wrote the offshore islands, so
I see.
Norfolk Island and so on. And so I wrote all the main text, and then I handballed it to Rowan just to give an edit, have a look at it, see what he thinks. So it was pretty good, because I actually wrote this text and I gave it to my mum to have a look, and she read it and edited it. Then I gave it to Rowan to have a look. He read it and edited it. And then I gave it to CSIRO, and they read and edited it. So it had got this perfect edit process. So I wrote that text, Rowan wrote the offshore islands. Rowan organised all the photos, so different photos coming in from here and there. I did the maps and other stuff. So that's what we did.
Understood. Yeah, that's great. Like kind of the cooperation as well is really important for big projects like this. And and I imagine that since then, that was 2014. A lot of Australia has changed, and especially probably in the last 3 years with the bushfires, huge tragic bushfires that there were. So how drastically do you think the information has been outdated, if at all?
To some extent. A lot of the places where the fires are, they actually bounce back. So in some ways, so we're actually working on a second edition now. In fact, I've actually written the second edition.
Wow, yes.
And it's actually just about to go to CSIRO. So the text's already done. It'll take a bit of time to do, simply because it takes time to do those things. It's a bit of a shame, because we were talking with CSIRO, and there's this dilemma of, do we reprint, which we've done several times, or do we go second ed now? And it looks like the book's sold out. So the sooner the second edition comes out, the better. But what I have noticed is my first book is now being put on the market. So Alan and Unwin is obviously, putting that out again too. So it's good. But the sites will change, but with things like fire, the way you might tackle that is in introductions. You say areas have been affected by fire, and they will grow back. So a lot of those places that, someone like Crow Jingalong, which was really hit by the fire, I went down there as part of a bird week, big bird weekend, and I was doing walks, and where I'd normally go had been burnt, so there was no birds really. But I do know that they'll come back. Fingers crossed, of course. But things like ground parrots, well, they'll recolonise some of the areas that are burnt. In fact, a lot of these places need burning. It's the simple fact that a lot of the birds like ground parrots, they actually exist in an environment which is it's pre and post fire regime. So they can't exist in a heathland that's been burnt for 5 years, in the last 5 years. But when it's 5 years old to about 20 years old, they love it. But after about 20 or 25 years, they start dropping out because it gets too long. So a lot of these places, it may be beneficial for a lot of the birds, certainly in the coming years.
I see. Yeah. But that's interesting. I would have thought like the birds themselves would change a little bit as the years go by. But I guess the information in this book can be considered semi-permanent. So what's changed with the new edition? By the way, of which I'm so happy to hear that it's going to come out. And I'm looking forward to it.
So I'm adding a heap of new chapters, and I've taking out those chapters which I think I haven't really got feedback from people. And what I mean by feedback is people saying they're going there, and so there's a few places that are just a bit out of the way, or not on the path of anybody. So in those cases, I thought, well, if nobody's going there and nobody's using the book to go there, then I can take it out. Any chapter I do take out, or section I take out, I will actually perhaps put on a website so that it's still sitting there. But what I'm putting in is sites that have become viable in the last 5 years or so. New places spring up, new hotspots appear. A lot of birding is about hotspots, and some of those places have become, obvious to people now. So things like, I won't mention in these sites. Just have to wait till the book comes out. But there's a whole bunch of new sites in there, and they're all fantastic.
Something just popped into my head when you mentioned the hotspots. I guess with the advent of eBird in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, more people using eBird, then that'll probably become a resource for you as well.
It has. eBird and Eremea was a resource for me. I don't know if you remember. Eremea was a sort of precursor in Australia to eBird, and they do tell you great things. And some birders use eBird to plan their trips, and I certainly do. But it's always nice to have a picture of a place and an understanding of a place to go, and that's sort of what my book is doing. It's painting pictures for people, and then eBird is the perfect sort of thing to couple with a book like mine.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point. Like it kind of complements eBird in a sense, doesn't it? By providing more richly detailed information, and I suppose more. The thing I liked about this one was the fact that there's directions, which you'd think that with Google Maps nowadays you wouldn't need it, but it's really reassuring to have that in paper in the book, I reckon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's right. I mean, and it's got context. So you might go to Hatter and it'll say, go down the old Calder Highway and then turn off, park on the right, and then I'll explain various methods of trying to find the birds. Whereas something like eBird just has a dot there. It doesn't sort of contextualize the whole thing. And finding birds is not just about a dot. It's often, it's about the process. And for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. I'm a huge fan. So I reckon it's going to be the second edition. So do you have a release date for that yet, or not quite?
It tends to take time. So I'm expecting about a year for it to come out. So I do know that Cyra's been hassling me for some time. They've been hassling me for about a year and a half to get it done. And well, I've got it done. And then they've been hassling me for the text. So literally, I got an email from the editor a couple of days ago, and I said, "Yeah, you're going to get it. I'll give it to you in a couple of days."
Yeah, fantastic. And has Rowan Clark also been helping out with this one too?
Yeah, he has, but he's also been really busy. So Rowan's a professor at Monash, and when I've tried to get assistance, sometimes he goes, "Look, I'm currently supervising 8 PhD students and finishing off their thesis." So he's been snowed under a lot. So, but it's sort of fine because with the text, I basically wrote the text anyway. So the sort of assistance I get from him might come down the track. But he's certainly been there. He's certainly been saying like, "Tim, I'm here. I'll be there for you." So it's great.
Right. Yeah. Understood. That's great. That's awesome. And it's kind of well, for me anyway, I can only speak from personal experience, but it's kind of a legendary partnership, Dolby Clark,
Yeah.
But I wanted to also shift from that and ask you kind of a more general birding question, which I think will be interesting for us to discuss, which is, what makes a good birder?
Okay. So I talked about it before, that learning to listen is really important. So as I said, when I walk through a forest, I'm just basically listening to the forest and listening to the sounds. So a good birder is one that listens, and they're listening to the sounds of the birds, the forest, to the environment, and to other birders. So that's really important. Another aspect of a good birder is someone who enjoys birdwatching. Birding and birdwatching is basically something to enjoy. And if you take it too seriously, then what's the point? So it doesn't matter really what level of birder you are. It's enjoying the process. And I see too many birders that are just too directional or one-directional in their approach to it. So for me, it's enjoyment of the birds that makes a good bird watcher.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, because one could feel an obligation sometimes to go out and go birding. I'm sort of like that sometimes. Like, whenever I have free time, it's like, I should go birding, but I should only go if I want to go. Sometimes I won't feel like it, which is fine too. Yeah.
So when I had the proposal for my book to CSIRO, I talked about the market, and this was before I wrote it. We put in a proposal, and they wanted to know who was the market for the book, and I said, well, the market is going to be my mum, and a couple of family members. It's going to be about, the relatively small but significant Australian birding community. Let's say, 20,000. But it's also going to be the 1 million British bird watchers that come here. So the target is, a million copies, potentially. It was, the point there is Australian bird community is quite small and linked. And I think you're probably finding that with your podcasts, aren't you? Where you're talking to, all these birders.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've discovered that, and I sort of have had an inkling of that, in the years coming up to this podcast. And I've been on Facebook a bit more recently, just kind of checking out who I can interview, and it's like I'm running out of names already, But it's like
I'll put some names for you. I'll give you some names later.
That'll be good. That'll be great. But to get to your point about the small but significant, you could say, community, it's so interesting because it's and the networking is such a huge aspect of it as well. Where you have everybody knows everyone sort of thing, which is great. It's so great.
It's true. I mean, I get contacted by so many people with just questions the whole time, which is great. I love it. That's just actually another sign of a good bird watcher, is someone who's willing to share the knowledge. So I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. It's and also moving up here, to go back to eBird. Also, I just thought about this, that online tools like Facebook and eBird are good for meeting other birders when you move places, because Coffs is quite far removed from Melbourne, and they don't have much to do with each other, but they're linked through birding, which is great. I see on the eBird,
so
eBird hotspots.
You got there and you just went, I'll just meet such and such, and then you all got together, and now you're probably friends going bird watching together.
Exactly right. Yeah, and so that's the beauty of birding and the joy of birding. It's always like we discussed at the beginning. It's just so multi-layered.
Somewhere like Coffs Harbour is good for that. I mean, Melbourne, one of the drags of Melbourne is, in fact, it's so big and so hard to get out. So in Melbourne, people don't really get together to go for a walk birding in their local park, if you know what I mean. We plan our birding trips out of Melbourne, whereas where you are, you can just say, I'm going for a walk, and someone will come with you, Yeah. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah, it's really nice. I really enjoy it, and it is. I can see from eBird that it is relatively underbirded. Judging by the lists and the few names that are around, and because I think a lot of people come on holiday and then leave, so it's not consistent.
Yeah.
But so I also wanted to touch. How are we going for time? Yeah, we're doing all right.
Yeah.
On your guiding work, because I don't know if you know Max Breckenridge at all.
I've heard the name. Yeah, I don't know him personally. Is he near you? Is he?
Yeah. I interviewed him about a couple of weeks ago, and his episode's coming out soon. And we talked about differences in guiding. You know, when
Yeah.
you birding when you're guiding, as opposed to birding when you're doing it for your own enjoyment. Is it different?
Yeah, it sort of is. When I'm guiding, I've usually got a group of people behind me, as many as 12 people. One time I had 16 people following me for about 2 weeks, sort of. And so one thing you have to be is you have to be knowledgeable enough to know everything that you're hearing and seeing, and then be aware of what other people haven't seen and then link them into those things. So, for example, when I'm birding on my own, I might not actually even get my binoculars. I've got my binoculars, but I may just walk and listen, and I might hear something, but I'm not going to go bother and track it down because I've seen it many times, and just hearing it is the beauty of the situation. When you're guiding, you hear something, you calculate what other people haven't seen, and you work out that two of the group haven't seen that bird, so then you've got to go and target it and find it. And so you're constantly doing that approach. The other thing is that the way I guide, the companies I work for will go into somewhere like Darwin or Cairns, and the aim is, in the time frame we've got, is to see every single bird that is available. So I go to Cairns and I'll visit every area, and in, say, the 7 days I've got, we leave with the group having seen every single bird that you have to see. So whereas if I went to Cairns on my own, I'd just go for a walk, if you know what I mean. But with this, it's this literally, bang, we've got to get everything. Then we've got to go to Darwin, and then go to Kakadu, then go to Catherine, and we've got to see every bird. These people are paying a lot of money, and if they miss something, they know about it. They're constantly saying, when are we going to see the golden bowerbird? You said golden bowerbird. It's on the, and so I've got to show them everything. So that can be, fortunately I do. That's what I can do. But that sort of aspect of the birding is a bit different. I mean, it's not always like that, because when I do the tours for international companies, that's how it is. When I do local birding, I might just have someone wanting to have a good day bird watching, and that can be really fun as well.
Yeah, I imagine those are the more enjoyable outings, when it's just someone who's kind of not too intent on getting every single one.
They're just having fun, absolutely. So I've bird guided a guy, and we saw some galahs on the ground, and we spent about an hour and a half with him photographing the galahs, and
wow.
so that was just one of those things.
Yeah, but I imagine you do feel a lot of pressure sometimes. How do you deal with the pressure of, like, if you get a particularly tough client who's kind of...
I do get occasionally tough clients, but I'm pretty good with the pressure, because I'm confident in myself, and I know that I can get everything, and I know that I'm the best birder there. So I don't stress, because I know what the outcomes we're going to have. I know that we're going to see the birds. So in some ways I can enjoy the process. So an example of enjoying it. So one of the places we go is Lady Elliot Island, or I've been there a few times. I don't know if you've ever been to Lady Elliot Island.
No.
So we go in, we fly into this island with American bird watchers and stuff. Because it's an island, there's a limited number of birds on the island, and generally speaking, you can see them all by about lunchtime. So after lunchtime, I say to the group, who wants to go snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef? And 2 or 3 people go, yeah, great. And so I'm getting paid to go to Lady Elliot Island and go snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef, and all I have to do is just go swimming there. And so that can be really enjoyable when you're sort of doing that sort of stuff. It's good fun.
Yeah, great. That's so cool. It's really inspiring, when you can kind of make a living out of your passion. That's kind of the end goal, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It is good fun. It is good fun.
All right. Well, we're gonna start wrapping up. But it's been such a fantastic episode. Wow, I'm blown away. So I want to know, Tim Dolby, what is your favorite bird?
Okay. It actually is a bit romantic. So romantic in the sense that it involves my family. So So in Victoria, for example, perhaps my two favourite birds are rufous bristlebird and scarlet honeyeater. And the reason is because the rufous bristlebird was a special bird when we went to the Otways and went camping or staying in the Otways. And the scarlet honeyeater is important because when our family used to go down to Malakuta for holidays, and as you turn off the highway into Crow-Jingalong, you start hearing scarlet honeyeaters sort of twinkling in the forest around you. And for me, that symbolised that sort of it had arrived. We got there. This was the start of our holiday. So they're probably my two favourite birds.
Lovely. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I like that. Often it's, people think it's just about the look of the bird, but it's rarely that case. Mostly people have favorite birds because they have an experience with it or a link with it. Yeah.
That's right. And there's many others that I enjoy for those reasons. The wall creeper in Europe, for example. I mean, I've since seen wall creepers. I saw them in Bhutan recently when I went to Bhutan, and there's wall creepers there. But that's probably my favorite international bird because of the romantic story I've seen with my mum.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I understand that. It's like the personal links are the ones that count, really, at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in the same vein, do you have a dream destination or that you'd like to go to, and indeed a dream bird?
Well, in terms of destinations, in Victoria, there's so many great places: Waikowhai, Crow-Jingalong, Hatta, Goshen, little small place that's a little bit like Alice Springs. In fact, further afield, if you think, there's up around Cairns, there's the Tablelands and so on. I really like a place called Lawn Hill. I don't know if you know Lawn Hill. It's this wonderful gorge where you can go swimming in this gorge, and they've got purple-crowned fairy wrens as well. So Lady Elliot Island's great because you go there, you go and see the birds on the island, seabirds, things like tropic birds and stuff. And then you can go for a snorkel in the Great Barrier Reef. And the Great Barrier Reef there is just stunning. So many fish, so many things that you can see. And perhaps another spot, just as a sort of a sum up on that, is that Edith Falls. I don't know if you've been to Catherine and Edith Falls. So Catherine and at Catherine, at this particular place, you can see Gordian finches in the morning. So you wake up, you go to a waterhole, and there's a flock of 300 Gordian finches coming in to drink.
Wow.
And then as the day heats up, you go for a swim in Edith Falls. So if you think about that, there's Lady Elliot Island, seabirds going for a snorkel. There's Lawn Hill, purple-crowned fairy wren, go for a swim up the gorge. Edith Falls, go for a swim and see the Gordian finches. So there you go.
Yeah, for sure. And what about dream bird that you still need?
I haven't seen a night parrot. That'd be good. So I haven't really. I've targeted a few times in the past. I haven't targeted it since it's been found, if you like. So maybe one day.
Oh yeah, that would be so epic. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be definitely.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your dream bird?
Oh, dream bird. I don't know. Off the top of my head, it's really difficult. Dream bird. Well, internationally. I'll start internationally. I've always had a soft spot for the ibis bill. Looking at images of the ibis bill.
Yeah.
Oh,
I've seen it.
Have you really?
I've seen it in Bhutan. So and it's absolutely fantastic. It goes along the Rocky Creek lines, and the bill's designed just to go underneath the rocks, and the rocks are all round, so it just flips.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the wrybill, isn't it, in New Zealand with the
yeah, which flips over the rocks. Yeah. So lovely. We'll go to Bhutan. It's a beautiful place. I went there a couple of years ago, and it was just a great place to go to.
Oh, beautiful.
And you'll see ibis bill.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's definitely in the plans. When we can travel again, more or less. It's still a bit iffy, but yeah. Oh,
what's lovely. A bird? Is there a bird around where you are that you haven't seen yet that you're keen to see?
My bogey bird for the Coffs Coast, and my friend Jack Morgan will understand this because he was the young birder I interviewed a couple of episodes ago. The Pacific Baza. Haven't seen a Pacific Baza yet.
Wow, that's a great bird to look for.
Yeah.
They hunt by smashing into a tree and getting an insect on the tree. So if you see this bird flying into the outer canopy of a tree and smashing in, that'll be a bazzer. So that's a good one to have up your sleeve. So you'll look forward to it.
Yeah, and I'll make sure I know the call inside and out as well. So if I hear it, I can get to it.
It's got big round wings as well. So when you see a raptor with big round wings, that's another indication.
For sure. Well, the thing is with that bird is that there's those times where you're almost certain that it was that, but you're like, I don't want to count it because I didn't see it well enough.
Your mind's eye starts playing tricks on you. You sort of yes, and then you convince yourself. But it's always worth waiting for the next time.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of work hard for that one in the coming weeks. So wish me luck.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks. Well, thanks so much, Tim Dolby. What a pleasure it's been. Thanks for the time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Birding Today podcast. New episodes are released every Friday, and if you'd like to get in touch, just write an email to birdingtoday@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.